Whereas in the previous videos, we defined a first level of origins of our problems. In this video we will define a first level of solutions to them, which even if also abstract and theoretical, are fundamental steps towards something extremely tangible and practical. And even if once introduced they might seem obvious, they are often disregarded.
In a previous video, thanks to Dr. Kahneman and his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, we learned that two different systems coexist into our minds, both used to make decisions. The first system, which operates automatically and quickly, with little or no effort, and no sense of voluntary control, is always on, and cannot be turned off. While the second system is turned on, at the request of the first, for more complex reasoning and decisions. Using the second system is tiring, and requires the consumption of a considerable amount of calories. But more importantly, we also learned what we probably wouldn't like to admit. Too often, we make decisions based on their speed and cost, even if they are wrong, and even if we have enough information that should lead us to different and better choices. But Dr. Kahneman also says that the system takes over in emergencies and gives total priority to self-protection actions. For example, if while we are driving our car, we suddenly swerve because of a slippery road, we would suddenly find ourselves in a potential emergency, and we will react instinctively, without asking ourselves what to do. The interesting thing is that a potential problem for someone can turn into pleasure and fun for someone else. There are competitions in which handling these situations becomes the norm. Indeed, those conditions are created on purpose to facilitate the occurrence of the problem. This is exactly what drifting lovers do. They choose particularly slippery surfaces and build cars that have the necessary characteristic to facilitate drifting. Therefore, it is possible to turn a potential problem into a learned skill.
Dr. Kahneman himself certifies with his knowledge in scientific terms what we have already experienced in various contexts. He said that as we become skilled at a task, its demand for energy diminishes. Even these skilled drivers, when they were novices, would have had difficulty performing a drift, and would have been subject to physical and mental fatigue. But now that they have become skilled in this action, they can perform it better, and with less fatigue. What made it possible to turn a problem into a skill? By simplifying it as much as possible. It's the practice. They automated their actions, moving them from the second system, when they still had to think about how to handle this situation, to the first system, when responding to this particular situation became almost a mechanical action. They learned to handle the same situations faster, reducing the required calorie consumption, and being able to perform more of them, with almost no stress. In this case, even turning it into fun.
In an activity, such as recreational diving, where certain actions and phases are repeated essentially the same in each of our dive, even several times per dive, it is possible to automate a large number of them. To automate means to be able to respond to a request using the cheap and fast first system, leaving the more powerful, but also slow and wasteful second system available for more complex, and perhaps non-automatable scenarios. If the first clearing mask we performed required the activation of the second system to ensure that we put into practice what we learned, then after a certain number of repetitions well performed, the same procedure started to be run by the first one. If emptying the mask still requires large doses of concentration and still generates stress, then we have not yet automated this skill.
This already viewed document reminds us that only 20% of new divers will take an advanced course, while as many as 80% will not, and will therefore continue the rest of their diving career, relying solely on the training learned in their basic course. It has to be assumed that most of us not only have not yet automated even the basic actions, but probably we also have no idea how to automate them. Have this 80% of divers been taught how to automate? This 80% of divers have no hope of automating their actions? Everyone can automate learned skills, taking them to a higher level of performance. What about those who are part of the 20%? Will they surely automate? There is no certainty that this will happen, because it is not a goal of the various diving courses we attend. Fortunately, many divers have figured out for themselves how to achieve this. We are almost always talking about the most experienced and committed divers.
For the other divers, fortunately, Dr. Anders Ericsson thought of it. He has devoted his professional life to the study of those people in various fields who have achieved excellent levels of performance. Dr. Ericsson organized what he called deliberate practice and the various necessary factors that make it effective. We can take advantage of his studies, adapt them to the diving context, and use them to improve, up to automate when possible, the actions and skills we need. This is a fundamental part that we will return to later in our journey, and that everyone has to face sooner or later, and even if this is the most concise, efficient, and logical path, it is largely ignored. So that now, you don't have to interrupt the video to research this. Let's give this rough and coarse definition, so that we can put the discussion that follows into context. Dr. Ericsson would probably never have used these words, but among us, divers, we will understand each other, and he would understand why we don't want to deeper discuss the point right now. The deliberate practice, applied to automate a skill, involves the diver knowing how to correctly perform that skill, performing it, identifying any mistakes made, and repeat the cycle until success.
Let's see how the application of the deliberate practice can help us, and let's do so by going over the 3 villains that can potentially prevent us from well performing a skill, much less automating it. But first of them, what is a skill? A diving skill is any action we perform while diving, assuming we are talking about actions that are useful to the dive itself. Emptying the mask is a skill. So are throwing the SMP, finning, managing our buoyancy, checking our instruments, and so on. The whole management of our dive, that is acting in such a way as to meet all set parameters, ensuring safety, fun, and adventure, is also a skill.
And now, let's see the 3 villains. When we talk about problems, we talk about technical mistakes, stress, and fear. Stress and technical mistakes can occur singly or in pairs, and in varying order, so they can be cause or consequence. One can cause the other, just as each can be self-feeding. The combination of stress and technical mistakes complicates matters. If fear is also present, we are probably already risking more than we should.
Technical mistake. A technical mistake is the failure to apply the mere necessary diving technique. The necessary technique is not applied, either because we do not know it, or because we are unable to apply it, because of the stress we are under. A technical mistake that is not caused by stress is among the easiest situations to resolve, with the targeted application of the deliberate practice.
Stress. Stress can be a physical or mental tension, or even both together. And it can be generated by external or internal factors, or even both together. As seen in a previous video, solving stress problems must begin by deciding the starting point of the progression. This point must create a level of stress that is easily manageable for us, so that we can devote ourselves effectively to solving what is causing us stress. Having made the necessary techniques our own, at this stress level, we can move on to the next step on the path. A progression by small steps, keeping techniques and stress always within levels that facilitate progress, even small ones, rather than facilitating painful setbacks. And again, the deliberate practice is the best way to resolve these situations.
Fear. If there is a way to overcome fear, surely this way will include deliberate practice. That said, it is good to clarify what kind of fear we are referring to. If we were to count how many divers have lost their lives, mistakenly believing they were doing something for which they were prepared, the result would be shocking. As usual, better to put safety above everything. Some fears are the simple result of more or less small mistakes made in the past. For example, years of clearing mask, performed on the edge of the drop, without ever really becoming a master of the technique, can become our fear. Perhaps, during one or more of these emptying, we even had to rise to the surface, because we had lost control of the situation. Fortunately, nothing serious happened, but we were never able to solve this problem that remained present in us. However, this fear is still within acceptable limits. We are already beyond the stress, and it should not happen, but a lot can be done. And even in these cases, the deliberate practice is essential.
However, other fears are more difficult to overcome. It is not uncommon to hear claims as, "I am afraid of the blue. If I see the bottom degrading too fast, I get anxious. I am terrified of fish." And, "I started diving to overcome my fear of water," and so on. If these kinds of fears can be overcome, then surely the deliberate practice will play an important role. But whereas for the other fears, the diver has an active role, which reasonably suggests that progress has been achieved, in the case of these fears, the diver often can do no more than mere exposure to the potential problem, just when and if it occurs. What is the problem with fear? The problem is that we never know if we have truly overcome it, and suddenly discovering that we have not overcome it can have unpredictable and undesirable consequences. We must always act carefully.
Thank you for watching this video, and take a look at its description for the link to the next episode of this series.